Okay, we are live. Thank you all for tuning in for our third episode of the Lombard Lounge, building on Bitcoin. My name's Matt. I'm head of product at Lombard. Very excited for the panel today as we've got three of the top founder builders with us. We've got Riyad from Cubist, Hansi from Nubit, and Alexei from Bob. So at Lombard, we're on a mission to turn Bitcoin into a productive financial asset, not just a store of value. We issue the leading Bitcoin stake token, Liquid Bitcoin, or LBTC for short. But we won't talk too much about Lombard in this episode. We're really here to talk about everyone else and what's going on in the ecosystem. I guess as of today, Bitcoin's treading water around 105, maybe sitting a good base. I remember our first episode of this, we hit an all-time high, didn't quite make it last week, so we'll try again today, which is probably the main reason everyone tunes in. So what we're going to do is dive into a slightly more technical episode this time, spotlighting three of the teams we have here today, and we're going to go through some of the latest technical breakthroughs in Bitcoin development, what everyone's focusing on, how they're going to add value to bring Bitcoin and DeFi together more so in a programmatic way, how to safely build complex applications and financial products on Bitcoin, and then what the DevTools infrastructure layer is starting to look like and take shape. Before we meet our builders, if you have any questions, please do write them in the chat, and we'll either take some as we're discussing, or we'll take them at the end as well. So I'd love to get some more questions from everyone, please. We'll do introductions, and then we will have three segments. Well, two segments. We'll take some. I go through some general questions on Bitcoin finance. We'll go a bit deeper in the second segment, more towards DevTools, programmability, and then we'll do our usual kind of rapid fire as well at the end, just to put everyone on the spot a bit more. So that's enough from me. I would love to get an introduction from Alexei first. We'll go alphabetical. So what are you building, and why does it matter for Bitcoin?
Well, thanks for having me. So hi, I'm Alexei. I'm one of the founders of Bob. We're building a hybrid chain. It's a layer 2 that's designed to combine the best of Bitcoin and Ethereum. So Bitcoin security, big access to Bitcoin as the asset with one click, with a trust minimized way to actually deposit BTC into the chain. So no more wrap Bitcoin, no more XYZ BTC, but actually Bitcoin, just like ETH is ETH on Arbitrum. BTC will be BTC on Bob, powered by BitVM. And at the same time, we plug into Ethereum's DeFi ecosystem. We work with the majority of the tier 1 DeFi players like Euler, Uniswap, Aave, institutional custodians, to essentially combine the best of these two worlds and to become the gateway to Bitcoin DeFi.
Very good. Great to have you here. Thanks for joining us. And if we go over to Hansi next.
Thanks for having me. I'm Han Zhi. I'm co-founder of Nubit and a PhD researcher at UCSB. So at Nubit, we set out to build, we have been building on kind of DA, BVM to give developers the full toolchains they need. And starting with Bitcoin Thunderbolt, it's a protocol that enables faster Bitcoin to make it possible to send Bitcoin instantly, and you can build entire applications on Bitcoin mainnet. So that's what we are building.
Very good. I still love the name. I know I say this multiple times, but Bitcoin Thunderbolt, what a fantastic product name. And Riyad, over to you.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. I'm Riyad. I'm CEO and co-founder of Cubist. I'm also faculty at Carnegie Mellon, so I think about cryptography, ZK proofs, all of this. So actually, I'm really glad to be chatting with you folks who are really building stuff on top of them. At Cubist, we're building, in 3 words, key management infrastructure, but I guess it gets, as you go deeper, it gets maybe a little more complicated. So I think most relevant here, we're kind of taking the traditional idea of, off-chain key management. We're really blending it with sort of on-chain notions of roughly smart contracts, that is, committing to code that is then immutably attached, in our case, to keys. That is enforced using secure hardware. And the result is that you get what we call hardware enshrined smart contract. And this lets you actually build applications that are very similar to what you might build on a chain, but you're actually not wedded to any particular chain, and you don't require that chain's functionality to support, say, smart contracts. So as you can imagine, this is great for Bitcoin. It's also great for other chains because you get things like, atomicity, even when dealing with two different chains. So there's a lot of exciting, kind of interesting stuff that you can do as a result of this. But yeah, we're excited to be here, like I said.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Let's dive straight into it then. So as we know, Bitcoin Fi is growing very fast, still early. I think I've been in the space since 2016, predominantly on the Ethereum side through the first 6-7 years of that, before I started going deeper into Bitcoin finance and just observing some of the projects that were around. It's always amazed me that for the world's leading crypto asset, neutral crypto asset, that there haven't been more teams building in this space. And the fact it still kind of feels very early, it kind of feels like we're in 2017, 18 again, when a lot of the original protocols were launching on the Ethereum side. So the question I have is really, what infrastructure gaps remain before we can scale BTC Fi to the masses even further than what's been accomplished over the past 2 years, I'd say, in this space. So I'm going to throw that question out to spice things up. Hansi first.
Yeah. So the question is like, why upgrade, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, well, it's kind of like very simple. Like we just need opcat. It's very tiny, and it's a very tiny opcode, and it's like, so from the social consensus perspective, I think it's much easier to accept, and many people have been pushing this forward, and although it's very simple, it can unlock a lot of capabilities. For example, we can use opcat to optimize a lot of like current applications such as BVM. We can make it more efficient. And although it's like a very simple CAD, it actually just like enable developers to concat two different stack items, elements out of a stack, but it can enable a lot of fancy stuff. Like you can do stock verifier directly using opcat, and make everything much easier.
Very good. So in a one-liner, what is Bitcoin Thunderbolt?
Some Bitcoin Thunder is a protocol. It's a protocol that enables faster Bitcoin. It's a kind of one-liner.
Very good. And you mentioned BitVM as well. Maybe Alexi, if I throw it your way, you could talk a bit about BitVM and what the opportunities are there, and how it fits into Bolt.
Sure. I mean, the beauty of, we've talked about, do we need Bitcoin forks or not? And the beauty of BitVM is that it works without Bitcoin forks. Without, diving in first into the whole technical notions and whatnot, I think, what does BitVM mean for the user? It means that you can use your Bitcoin on a platform, a layer 2, in a way that it's real Bitcoin, right? You don't have to think about who has my Bitcoin custody when we're wrapping it. It's essentially the same as using Ether Arbitrum, right? And the way BitVM works is that it allows us to replicate the same fraud-proof designs that we've seen on Ethereum layer 2s, but on Bitcoin. So you can deposit your BTC into a layer 2, and you can always get it out. And you know that, as long as somebody's online to complete a challenge, if something's going wrong, you'll always get your Bitcoin back. I'll pause here as I'm losing my voice, but I'm happy to come back on the technical side in a second.
That's okay. Grab a drink. We'll judge based on what you're drinking. Okay, so before we go too deep into some of the technicals as well, let's just think about other infrastructure gaps. So we've talked a bit about BitVM and optimistic fraud proofs for challenging kind of the peg out ability from DeFi back to Bitcoin. We've mentioned opcat as well, which would require a hard fork of Bitcoin as well. If we think more holistically as well about what's needed over the next couple of years from this early stage, Riyad, if I throw it your way? What are the other missing gaps?
I'm going to give a much more boring answer. Like, I mean, all the exciting answers like, Stark verification using OpCat and BitVM and all this. I mean, to me, that's, that's sort of the hardcore bleeding edge coming out, and all of us are there. Obviously, we wouldn't be here otherwise. But there are a lot of boring things that we need too. So here's an example. If you want to go and build an application on Ethereum right now, you can go to, I mean, you basically can't like throw a rock without hitting a provider who will, give you nodes that are, super reliable and, just work. The same is really not true of Bitcoin. I mean, just the like simple stuff. Can I like click a button and get a bunch of nodes spun up for me? The answer is much weaker in the case of something like Bitcoin. Another example is just wallet support generally for Bitcoin is pretty bad. I mean, we're how many years out from SegWit and then Taproot, and yet a lot of custodians can't handle much beyond legacy addresses and maybe SegWit. Certainly, Taproot is a challenge. I mean, look, we're still in a universe where like even a ledger, and ledgers tend to be something that you can reasonably use, but like still there's a struggle to use a ledger for something as, I mean, it's not exactly simple, but like as relatively simple as like staking on Babylon. So yeah, I mean, there's basic blocking and tackling to do here. Bitcoin is a very complicated protocol compared to Ethereum. There's a lot more going on in terms of the statefulness that you need when you actually generate transactions, the way in which you sign transactions, et cetera. Like all of that is just more complicated with Bitcoin, and so there's just more work to do. But right now, like even that stuff is missing. So I think for the median developer who just wants to jump in and like start building some cool stuff, like it's much easier on Ethereum where you write some code that looks roughly like JavaScript. There's a nice debugger that you can use in your browser. You can go get spin up a service and like push a button and boom, you've got a smart contract deployed. The corresponding story for Bitcoin right now is much worse. And I think until we can solve that, like all of these other things are really nice, but like for the median developer, like you're not getting them in the door unless they can like actually, build something reasonable.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, if we think about developer tooling around Ethereum and EVM, like that's taken years and years to get to a relatively consistent place with the tools you can write Solidity in and even blockchain explorers, analytics, etc. as well. So what else is missing from the developer experience on the Bitcoin side? Because if those foundational assets get built up, obviously we had like consensus to help kind of bootstrap a lot of this on Ethereum, then that kind of obviously leads to this major unlock of engagement and building, I think, for developers too. So what's missing there? Let's go for Handy.
Well, I think we miss a complete tool chain. So for example, for Ethereum developers, and if I'm writing Solidity, I have Remix, I have like Hardhat, user scan, everything. But for Bitcoin, if I'm trying to develop some like Bitcoin script, I need to manually piece things together. So we need to manually write the code. And it's actually like low level code. There's no like kind of usable high level data cell, and we need to convert everything in Rust. And it's just like a DSL. It's not that usable actually. And if we want to try to debug the whole thing, we need to manually like inspect the stack, and it's a total mess. And it takes us so long to kind of build something very useful. For example, for BVM, I think there are several teams building BVM for almost 2 years. So it's, I think, mostly because of the toolchain, the program language they're using.
I honestly, I'd probably argue against that. I think the challenge, I agree with the toolchain 100%, right? Bitcoin tooling is certainly is difficult, but there exists quite a bit of stuff, but it's always been developed in the context of Lightning and things like Miniscript. And you do know, if you dig deeper, you see like there's a bunch of like Ledger has some cool things that they've been bringing out for a while now. But the interesting part is always lived in the context of the Bitcoin maxi community. And I say maxi community, it's not meant in a negative way, but it's been really focused on Bitcoin and Lightning only. And it's never been, but the standards are different. People are used to much more low-level technical UXs. They're very technical teams that focus on low-level protocol design. There's not many product teams there. But the product teams that focus on product and user interactions, they can't go down and start thinking about, oh, how do I build this in Bitcoin script? Like, that's not, you need to suddenly hire, like you need a much bigger team, and you don't focus on what you're really good at is shipping a good product and getting distribution. So I fully agree with that. But the one point I would make is that with BitVM, the bottleneck isn't really Bitcoin script and tooling, it's the protocol design and like really making it efficient and the cryptography behind it. Yes, like Bitcoin is limited in what script can do, or specifically in the size of the scripts we can execute, right? We can build anything in script, to be fair, and there's enough engines, and like you can easily figure out how to stack these things together. I agree, it's not as good as Solidity, by far not. But you know, with BitVM teams, these are highly technical teams, right? The challenge for us isn't like, oh, how do we write the Bitcoin script for transactions? It's rather, how do we actually make this efficient that we can execute a challenge transaction and it follows the correct flow and it still fits into the block? And how do we actually resolve some like other challenges with operator collateral? And we've been working on like some optimizations. And the reason with BitVM that it's taking time is it is complex. And if you look at Ethereum, how long it took us to get from idea, commit chains, plasma, rollups to production ready, and like so that the majority of this top 10 chains are stage 1, it's been what, 6 years now, 7 years, right? The plasma paper came out in the same time commit chains, which was almost like the first real kind of design of like how to do rollups or somewhere in that direction, came out in 17, 18. And we're still like just getting there. So with BitVM, yes, it took us like, we could say it's 2 years, but realistically the BitVM 2 design, we published that only August last year. That's when it kind of like, okay, that's when you kind of should start counting, because that's when we really had like a blueprint that works. And for that, okay, it's going to be a year in August. You have test nets. Things are basically almost there. It's being audited. So I think we're moving fast enough. In terms of like the ETA for BitVM, I mean, there are private test nets, and there are public test nets, and there's a ton of optimizations. And you're going to see the same thing as you saw on Ethereum, where you see suddenly like designs kind of branch out. Already have BitVM X with BitVM 2. There's now BitVM 3 with like approaches with garbled circuits and like different technologies and different trade-offs of like what's feasible, what's not feasible. The question I'd rather ask is not when BitVM, but when will we get operators and institutions to use it so we actually can get adoption? And probably Riyad from Cubist, right? From our perspective, the way how we operate our Bob, you are actually our target to onboard as a BitVM operator, because one thing that people need to realize is tech is great. It really gives us this new perspective of how we can use Bitcoin and DeFi, but people are going to be cautious with trusting new technology. How many people understand how Lightning works? How many people will understand how BitVM works under the hood? And the thing with tech is, there's this curve where eventually the more people use it, the more trustworthy partners adopt it, the more people will trust it and start using it. Like, how many people know how Bitcoin works or Ethereum works under the hood, but they trust it because there's a big community of people who've looked at the code and audited it, and that's why we trust it. So the way we see BitVM is it's not like a replacement for WBTC. Our goal is that it's just a better way to custody than MPC protocols, right? It's a better way to keep Bitcoin secure while it's being used in different environments. And the only way we can ever succeed in getting BitVM to mass adoption is if we work with teams like Cubist, like Lombard, like custodians, to onboard and convince you guys that, look, this is a good design, this actually works, this scales, and this is going to give you the argument to say to your users, this is no longer wrapped. And that actually has business implications and tax implications as well. Because whereas, if you're bridging Bitcoin to RapidTC, that's a taxable event in many countries. If you're depositing ETH from Ethereum to Arbitrum, I haven't seen anyone call this a taxable event. But that is actually quite a big difference on the business side. And I'll pause here, but you can see that there's lots of nuances beyond tech, and ultimately tech is only a little step. on this, I think, long but hopefully very fruitful journey.
Yeah,
So
look, if I
if
can
I
just add, I mean, you're definitely speaking my language here. I mean, I think from my perspective, like one of the big challenges here is like even let's say we could wave a wand and like everything on the BitVM roadmap was done tomorrow. Um, Even then, there's still at the bottom this difference. Like if you're building on Ethereum, you're sort of the moral equivalent of a JavaScript developer. If you're building on Bitcoin, you're the moral equivalent of a Linux kernel developer. Like there's just a lot lower level stuff to be doing. And I think there's like actually a fundamental distinction there. Like the number of people who have ever contributed to the Linux kernel is minuscule compared to the number of people who every day get up and just like write some JavaScript, right? Who use React or whatever, right? And I think like it's not a trivial distinction here. It's actually a distinction in kind. Like if we can make interfaces that people can use, like if we can make the programming model simple enough that people are able to just write code, then like this is how we will get to the point where like we'll actually get adoption. Otherwise you end up in effectively the situation we're in now, where either you're a Bitcoin maxi and you're a Linux kernel developer, or you're like, that stuff is complicated, maybe someday it'll get better, and like you go back to Ethereum and use wrap BTC if you must. So like I think we really like we have a challenge here of like, and I mean, oh my god, I'm going to sound like Steve Ballmer here, but like developers, like we got to get the developers to use to like actually be able to build stuff before there will be applications that will bring people in who are not themselves Linux kernel developers.
Given we know it takes so long to get to a critical mass of developers, does that mean EVM is going to definitely be the execution environment for BTC, or is it going to be some new Rust-based version on top of RISC-V, or what's the short one-liner answer from everyone on for their opinion of where that's going to be in, let's say, 3 years' time?
If the distinction matters, we're already cooked. Like what we have to present to the user is an interface where they just write programs and they don't understand what's going on underneath. Like the average JavaScript developer doesn't know how the JIT works in the browser. In the same way, the average person who is going to be developing in this fanciful universe where we're really getting a critical mass of developers, they won't understand what's going on. And that's important because if you require them to, you will immediately, cut by 10 or 100x the reachable audience.
I'd say, and I mean, I fully agree. And look, why does the VM work so well? Because it's simple. It's limited, but it's simple. It's not the best. But JavaScript is by far not the best language. Jesus, no, it's not. It really isn't. But it works. It has adoption, and so does the EVM. And look, I mean, Bitcoin has very close ties to C++, specifically also now Rust. And I do see that a lot of the infra will be built in Rust. And like, look at Bob, everything that's not the EVM, we build in Rust. But for the applications, the EVM is just the way to go, right? The tooling's there, and for anything else to catch up, it's going to take a long time. If you're like Solana is doing a great job, but still the tooling chain, it's so far away from the EVM that I think, there might be VMwares coming up, but at the end of the day, either EVM, like for every new VM language, whatever app that builds on another chain, there's 50 building on the EVM, if not 100. And that just, I think it's not going away. You might have alternatives like, you have Linux users, you have Windows users, you have Mac users. But at the end of the day, EVM is going to be up there, probably number one for a long time.
And I think the whole situation actually reminds me of like a lot of where zero knowledge proof was like 3 years ago. So back then, if you want to write a ZK application, for example, like an anonymous poll, you had to handwrite some like circuits and manually manage all the constraints. And it's super technical. It's like a linear kernel. It's super painful. But then back in days like 4 months ago, when ZK VMs actually came along, suddenly you could just write Rust like a normal program, and everything, including the proof generation, the verification, it was like handled for you. So essentially, it makes ZK way more accessible. I think same thing could happen to Bitcoin.
So we mentioned like hard forks earlier. We went straight into quite a deep technical discussion. So I wonder if someone would like to summarize like why we've been talking about why a Bitcoin hard fork would be beneficial in the context of verification of state and ZK proofs.
I mean, I can give it a shot. I mean, the very simple answer is, I think among everyone, whether it's laser eye Bitcoin maxis that are more like tech driven, L2 builders, app builders, I think everyone, there's consensus for Bitcoin to scale and to develop applications and to win in terms of being able to develop a DeFi ecosystem and stop losing developers, builders, capital to all the other ecosystems. We need layer twos. We need chains of whatever VM to be able to plug into Bitcoin, inherit security, have native deposits, and suddenly be able to compete with everything else that's on the market, with centralized exchanges and all the centralized providers that are currently offering Bitcoin services offer a decentralized alternative. The only way to do that on Bitcoin is by either building BitVM and making that scale. And look, BitVM is a hack. Like, let's be honest, BitVM is a hack. And if you look at the Ethereum world, where fraud proofs were the first way to go, now everybody's just doing ZK proofs and ZK rollups. If we had an upgrade to Bitcoin that would allow us to run a ZK verifier in Bitcoin script, we'd all do that. There is no doubt, right? I think there is debates around how to do it. But what many people don't know is that BitVM, Robin came up with BitVM because they were trying to hack a ZK verifier into Bitcoin script, right? That was the motivation. It didn't work. And so BitVM was the next best thing you could do. So at the end of the day, what we want to do is L2s. We want to build applications on Bitcoin so you can use BTC and you shouldn't worry about 10-minute block times, expensive transactions, lightning fast. But there's a pun there, lightning fast without the complexities and pain points of lightning, and much more powerful. And that is why we're talking upgrades again, because realistically speaking, BitVM's cool, it's gonna work, but it's definitely not my personal choice. If I could decide between having a ZK verifier directly in Bitcoin or using fraud proofs, I go for the ZK verifier. But we're pragmatic. We know that this is gonna take a long time and there's a lot of nuance to adding a fork to Bitcoin. But that's kind of
Very
the
good.
TLDR.
So one word answer. What's going to hit like mass adoption first? Is it going to be a Bitcoin hard fork? I mean, I know this is a crystal ball kind of question. Or is it going to be BitVM adoption?
BitVM, because if you really want more Bitcoin hard forks that allow us to optimize for Bitcoin L2s, we need to prove that there is demand. You need to, and that's BitVM.
I think there's a social problem here. I think it's kind of well known that like the folks who are actually going to make decisions about whether a Bitcoin hard fork happens or not are mostly at this point still staunchly against any hard fork that introduces this kind of functionality. I mean, there's kind of a joke that in the Haskell community that the Haskell programming language does everything that it can to avoid becoming a successful language. And there's sort of a a relationship there to like the eternal September. What they don't want is a massive influx of sort of noobs saying, hey, like here I am, like teach me stuff. When I look at the Bitcoin maxi community, I see something very similar. I see folks who say, like, we like the functionality that we have, and we don't want success if success is defined as massive DeFi adoption and this sort of thing. So, and that's not to say that they don't want their own version of success. They just don't want that. And so, I mean, I think BitVM, like in the same way that it's a technical hack, it's also a social hack. It's a hack in the sense that like, well, you can't stop us from doing this. In the same way that Babylon is a social hack, you can't stop us from doing this. It's something that you built into your system already. I think that's the way that you actually get there, because if you actually have to convince a significant fraction of the recalcitrant, evidently, Bitcoin developers that they should be adding functionality to enable things that they frankly just don't want, that's not a successful path. So from my perspective, like as much as there's a technical problem here, there's a problem of what can we do given the constraints on the social or political side too. And so yeah, from my perspective, like anything that requires a hard fork for success is right now, it's difficult to see how that path is a successful one. That could change, right? It could be that, you know, Babylon like convinces everyone that, you know, there should be some sort of staking functionality. Bob convinces everyone that there should be some sort of L2 function, right? Like it could be that that's the world we get into, and like in 3 years we'll all get back on this call and we'll say, ha, we were so naive a few years ago. We just had to wait and it would have worked. But like, if I had to bet which universe we live in, I don't think that's the one we do.
Yeah, in my opinion, like given the current state of social consensus in Bitcoin, I think BVN has like a much higher chance of landing first and succeeding. And yeah, like we can even agree on something as simple as how to handle like OP return. Like that's the state we are at. So it's let alone that like we spend like weeks of debate on like kind of simple stuff like OP return, like let alone discussing a soft fork.
Makes
Yeah.
sense. Makes
You know,
sense.
I've said a lot of
That's
words and I
interesting.
apologize, but like I want to point out, like I want to say here, like, because I don't want to like paint a target on my back for one thing. I don't think that this is necessarily a bad thing. Like one of the reasons that Bitcoin is a store of value is like intrinsically related to the social consensus thing, right? The reason people look at Bitcoin and say, yeah, it's worth 100K, you know, per BTC is, you know, they don't make breaking changes. They don't do stuff that like pisses off half the community. They sometimes refuse to do stuff, and that refusal pisses off the community. But that's fine in some sense. Like inaction, I think a bias towards inaction for something that's supposed to be a store of value, or again, that's the way many people think about it. Is good, right? So I don't want to sound like I'm like criticizing the core developers here. They have a perspective. I think that perspective is the reason for the current version of success that we see in Bitcoin. But you know, the reason that all of us are here is because we see a different version of success that we hope exists in the future. And finding a way to reconcile those two is super important. And by the way, whatever that reconciliation is, it had better not destroy the perspective that Bitcoin, the perception that Bitcoin is a store of value. Because if it does, like we've just defeated ourselves, right?
So are those in contrast to each other? So if we think of gold as a store of value and how liquid it is in financial markets, I mean, we could argue with various degrees of how successful gold is. It's been used for many different things over millennia. So whilst I think everyone on this call is trying to make Bitcoin into more of a productive asset, is that in is that in contrast to a store of value, or can the two live in harmony?
But it's like changing. I think there's like nuance to this, because what we're saying is I think we're aligned. Let's not go change how Bitcoin works completely and break the narrative and like break Bitcoin. And I with the core developers, the job of core developers is actually maintenance of the Bitcoin protocol, which is the largest digital asset. It's the one thing that keeps the entire industry alive. If Bitcoin breaks, goodbye. We're all going home. Like that would be such a loss to humanity. So naturally, there's resistance to add new things. Their job is to maintain. The issue is that maintainers and the BTC builders don't often talk to each other as much, and there's a lot of work being put towards that. But yeah, but in the reference of gold, imagine I'd go out and say, oh, I have an idea that's going to change how gold, like the actual chemical construction of gold, changes. I think it makes it better. It makes it more shiny. Like that's what we're talking about here. Like it adds this thing, so now suddenly, or you could teleport gold around. It's like it's going to make transporting gold and like digital tokenizing it much easier. You could like teleport it and so on. But I need to change how the chemical. I mean, we're talking science fiction here, right? But I'm changing its chemical composition of the material. That may or may not, break it. We don't know. We hope not. We think not. We're very sure it's not going to break it, but it's going to change it. That's what we're talking about that's what Bitcoin fork means to the Bitcoin community. So it can be done. It has been done before, but you can feel like if you put it in perspective to gold, that's where there's a resistance. It doesn't so it could break Bitcoin as a store of value, and that is why but that's why kind of it's so risky and contentious. But using Bitcoin in DeFi is different. We already use Bitcoin in DeFi, and the question is like, do we need to change Bitcoin to make using Bitcoin and DeFi better, and like the cost benefit of that? But I don't think using Bitcoin and DeFi and it being liquid is a bad thing. On the opposite, it is very liquid. I mean, look how much Bitcoin is being traded every single day on centralized exchanges.
Yeah, that's where I guess I was wrong to say store of value, because gold was used as payments for a long time. It's only a store of value now when people are comparing it to fiat currency and different governments playing with supply and demand all day long. But the same is true of Bitcoin, right? It only became a store of value when pizza got too expensive to purchase with Bitcoin. So
But we're now trying. But some people are still trying to make Bitcoin a payment asset, which is funny. It's like as if I would go out and say, "Oh, now you should pay me in gold, and you should go buy your coffee in gold because that's good." That's why I think Lightning doesn't work too well.
There is a strong historical connection between folks who want to use Bitcoin as payments and folks who want to use gold, literal gold as payments. I mean, I don't know. I'm old, so I was around for a lot of discussions on the Cypherpunks mailing list where folks who were gold maxis became Bitcoin maxis. So I think it's an apt comparison.
that's fair. We've got some questions to fire through. So when BitVM, when's it going to be working live and people will start trusting it at scale? What's our estimate for that?
Mainnet end of year, but latest. There's going to be mainnet sooner, but training wheels will be on. But you'll see mainnets come out this year. I'm very confident of that. When will people start trusting it? Probably it's going to take another year. Like until you see LPs deploy at scale, it's going to take some time, unless we manage to convince the big institutions to adopt. And that's why we started BitVM Act with institutional partners to get them on board early, to decrease this time of it's live and people actually trust it.
Very good. Hansi?
Which version of BVM did you ask?
The one that
BVM
works.
1, BVM 2, BVM 3. So I think for BVM 2, yesterday I just saw like Babylon already did like a mainnet test, send some like test transactions on mainnet, the whole workflow. And I also heard like the BVM Alliance is working on the security auditing of the whole protocol, which is great. Like maybe this year. And for BVM 3, I think it sets like a more promising approach, but it's just like a proposal. So let's see.
Very good. Yeah, Babylon's test, they published it on Twitter earlier today. So it was good to see. I think it was $16,000 of transactions end to end. Obviously affects experience slightly depending on pricing. But it's great to see it working end to end. So I'm excited to see what kind of investigations there are into that flow, if there's any edge cases around that as well in future discussions. So that's pretty cool. Next question for Riyadh. Hypothetically, how would you make Bitcoin go faster?
I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do with it. So I think one of the really interesting things that, like one of the trends that we've seen for a long time, is like what's really going on with Lightning. It's Bitcoin, but you're not using Bitcoin, right? And there's a lot of, I mean, what is an L2 going to do? It's Bitcoin, but you're not really using Bitcoin, right? Somehow, eventually, it gets reconciled to Bitcoin. But right now, like in the moment when we're actually making a transaction, we're not using Bitcoin. So I think depending on your application, if that works, that like off-chain settlement that's followed by an on-chain sort of confirmation is effectively the way that you're going to get things to go faster. And what I've just described is basically so general that it applies to almost anything. But in the case of, like what we're thinking about at Cubist, I mentioned this briefly at the very beginning, this notion of sort of off-chain hardware enshrined smart contracts. What you can do as an example here is, if I'm trying to pay you in Bitcoin, we can actually do a sort of, using one of these sort of hardware enshrined smart contracts, we can do an off-chain atomic swap that is eventually settled, like once Bitcoin catches up, that is eventually settled. But in that meantime, between now and the settlement, we're protected by the security guarantees of the secure hardware. And if it's just you and me, then basically all we need is like, I believe that it's secure, you believe that it's secure, boom, we're done. And then once it settles to Bitcoin, then everyone believes that the transaction really happened. How do we go from there to effectively like we're building sort of security consensus, if you will, around like this, these hardware enshrined smart contracts are like actually doing something correct. That again depends on the application. But from my perspective, like building, I mean, whatever direction one goes, building faster stuff on top of Bitcoin involves sort of cutting apart the transaction into something happened, a while goes by, that thing gets confirmed eventually, like sort of and sort of written into the history of Bitcoin. With a Bitcoin transaction, those two things are like inextricably linked. When I send you a transaction, it doesn't happen till it's written to Bitcoin. By breaking that linkage, you break the sort of connection to the 10-minute block time and the 6 confirmations or whatever it is. So I don't know. That's an extremely general answer, but I'd say for a lot of people, for for the kinds of applications that folks want right now, doing sort of using sort of hardware-backed security as a way of sort of moving computation off chain is an extremely fast path to functionality. Like today, I can give you that functionality. You can write a smart contract. You can attach it using secure hardware to a key, and you can ensure that the behavior of that key is exactly what you want. Eventually, you might be able to get the same functionality using BitVM, and there are ups and downs to those. This is a question of like, what do you believe about security? But if the question is like, how do we do it today, then the answer is, I can already give you that today. And the way that we do this is move functionality off chain and provide security for the time delay between action happened and action committed to Bitcoin.
Settlement layer. So the trade-off of security, I guess, and security guarantees and settlement layer, and that's no different to TradFi operations as well. Each step is obviously the closer you get to the source of truth is more expensive and slower, and that kind of, I guess, pyramid of architecture equally applies to crypto and use case. So definitely agree there.
And in the normal financial system, we almost always experience the happy path, which is things happen quickly, life is okay. The unhappy path is the one that we really have to make sure is correct. And actually, this is, I think, in a sense, like I'm almost quoting here from David Che's tweet about BitVM, their experiment from earlier today. What they were really testing was, as he put it, the unhappy path. Can you actually do the challenge? And because the happy path, like things work, that's great. The unhappy path is things are okay even when something has gone wrong. That's the question you have to answer in order to believe that something is secure.
Thank you. I'm going to throw it over to Alexi and ask around Bob. So you're merging Bitcoin and Ethereum VM worlds. So why did you choose to go down the hybrid architecture approach? And I think we've touched upon the developer experience already, but what do you see as the big unlocks here for Bob?
We've been doing this for quite some time. It's been 10 years for me since I kind of became a Bitcoin maxi, you could say, and I've been working on Bitcoin ever since, trying to figure out ways of how can we do it, make it more useful without forking it. And we've built bridges before, and we've come up with ways, how we could securely bridge BTC, use economic security and whatnot. And we've observed the Bitcoin L2 attempts, and we've built in different ecosystems. And the one lesson we learned the hard way ultimately was that tech is not everything, right? You can build the best bridge, but if nobody can use it, it's worthless. And the way we approach the problem that we see is, okay, well, look, there's so much BTC out there. Everybody wants Bitcoin. Bitcoin has a brand greater than any other digital asset, right? It's like if you see the Apple logo on your iPhone, you know exactly what it stands for. Bitcoin already has that. But you can't really use it. If you want to use it, you have to go to centralized providers, or you wrap it and then you use it on Ethereum. Well, the reason we're building a hybrid is that we want to allow you to have better access to Bitcoin, have Bitcoin security tied closer to the Bitcoin ecosystem, make it more seamless to activate Bitcoin that is already floating around the Bitcoin main chain in people's ledgers and centralized exchanges, but keep it within the Bitcoin ecosystem. And at the same time, benefit from the innovation hub of DeFi that is Ethereum and the network effects there, right? Because it's a platform play. We're trying to allow Ethereum builders and projects that already have products there but want Bitcoin strategy, or builders that are familiar with that environment and are good product builders and want to build a product to easily deploy that. And then at the same time, we want to use Bitcoin's distribution because everyone has BTC. Everybody's looking for Bitcoin yield. Institutions, neobanks, wallets, exchanges, aggregators, everybody wants that. And we can provide you with a very easy access to it. If you integrate the Bob EVM, you get native access. You get access to native Bitcoin for like one-click staking, swaps, and even like BitVM bridge BTC for DeFi access. So you don't have to deal with the complexities of Bitcoin. We take away the pain for you to deal with the tooling, and we give you access to the asset itself and the products. And the reason for the hybrid is that, there's been attempts to build Bitcoin on tools before. And, kudos to Stacks and Rootsuck and all the others that have tried, and they're still around. They've done really well for themselves, but they haven't really been able to compete with the equivalents of Ethereum or Solana. And the reason is that they've built quite isolated from these DeFi ecosystems, right? And building isolation never really works. And two is that if you try to rebuild from scratch, and if you take a different VM, you customize it, and you're trying to do something different just for it's better and because it's more secure, well, you're just always trailing behind the EVM and Ethereum ecosystem, where you have billions of dollars being transacted and invested to make it better. And so if our goal is to make Bitcoin more successful, we need to use the tools we have. And the first thing we do is we level the playing field. So a builder doesn't have to decide between, I'm going to build on Bitcoin or one of these L2s, but I have no tooling. I have to start from scratch and I really have to go deep in the weeds, or I can go to Ethereum and I focus on distribution. No, you can do that now on Bitcoin. And that's what the hybrid design stands for.
Makes sense. Thank you for providing that clarity of vision to how Bob approaches the system design. I think it's something which there's a good commonality with everyone on this call is really the kind of long-term stepping stones we have to take on the journey we're on, right? Riyadh spoke about it. Hansi, obviously with Thunderbolt, the DA layer, you're really pushing the boundaries of what can be done here, and I think obviously there's steps you've taken with Thunderbolt to be able to get it live now, but also have this vision of what needs to happen longer term as well. So to throw that kind of over to you, how do you think Thunderbolt and the DA layer support is going to add value to scale Bitcoin?
Yeah, so the vision behind Thunderbolt is to enable a faster Bitcoin and also unlock new capabilities like stablecoin lending. So today, sending Bitcoin for ordinary user is slow, is funky, and building application on top of it is even harder. So we basically rethink how can we manage the UTXO, the ways that people manage their UTXO. So it can actually, the Thunderbolt protocol lets people to send and receive Bitcoin instantly, even if they are not online at the same time. And you can securely hand off the ownership of different UTXOs, and you can introduce lending and stablecoins on top of that. So and only the next owner can spend, which essentially is probably safe under all network conditions. And it works by introducing a kind of secure co-signing system. You still hold your key, but a committee also holds a backup key, like a two-of-two verification. This allows us to kind of support fast and off-chain transfers while keeping full control and safety for you. Of course, and that also means we need kind of strong partners to operate the committee. So we need to kind of work with Cubist and other trustworthy teams to make sure this is not just fast, but also it's secure under and secure enough for real Bitcoin users. So once the core is stable, we'll introduce more stablecoin, lending protocol, maybe NFTs. Probably it's definitely on the roadmap. And sooner than you think, we are keep pushing the core.
When NFTs? You said it's on the roadmap.
So sooner than you think. Yes. Yeah.
Sounds good. Awesome. Very good. I think we're pretty much almost at time. So let's do a quick fire round. So very short answers, puts people on the spot. So in one sentence, Bitcoin in 2030, Riyadh, go.
Better developer experience, still slower than Ethereum.
Alexi.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Bitcoin in 2030.
My bet is that there will be more BTC on L2s than in the ETF.
Hansi?
But Bitcoin is finally usable.
Very good. And then another question, which is always my favorite one because it gives everyone a very personal insight. So if you weren't building in DeFi or crypto, what would you be working in? What job would you be doing? Riyad.
Well, I'd probably just have the one job. I'd be an academic and would be working in a different kind of crypto.
Oh, okay. Let's make the question harder for you. If you weren't also working in academia, what would you be doing?
Oh, geez, that's a really hard question. Shoot. Gosh, I don't know. I hope that I'd be doing some kind of cryptography engineering, but probably I'd just have a job at Google like everyone else.
Sounds good. Alexi?
I mean, it's hard to say. I've been doing nothing else for the last 10 years. I mean, it's a very existential question. I think I'd probably be doing something in this direction, I think. Perhaps not Bitcoin DeFi, but I would be certainly looking to build decentralized financial tools. But it's a very hypothetical question. Are you assuming Bitcoin doesn't exist or like?
Let's go there. Yeah, Bitcoin doesn't exist. Parallel universe.
I would have probably ended up a security researcher. It might have ended up in a consultancy and eventually probably like gotten pulled into either AI or quantum, most likely one of these kind of two areas, which everybody was looking into. Because these were discussed back then when I was like, getting into Bitcoin, but at a much earlier stage.
Good answer. Hansi?
And for me, if I want building DeFi or like blockchain in general, I think I'm a PhD student on security, so maybe I'm going to like fix the traditional toolchain and like internet, just like building safer compiler, not safer finance, but safer compiler and safer kind of identity or like network protocols.
Okay, so everyone's working at Google.
The
Seems
end
to be the
state for
backup.
humanity. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very good. I think we can wrap up there. So really appreciate all of your time. Sorry, we went a bit over. Thanks for tuning in to everyone watching as well. Next week, we're going to dive into a bit of a sneak peek of what we've been building at Lombard lately. So hope to see everyone there. Thank you very much to our fantastic panelists, and thanks again for listening.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us. Bye-bye.
You
Cheers. Bye.